Okay, so we're gonna get back to it. This is probably one of my favorite things to talk about. I've always been really creative with my 4-H groups. A lot of my kids have seen this stuff done before, um, and I just want to say, with this specific presentation, there's going to be a lot of you know differences in opinion on what people think are important, and I just want to remind everybody that this is, again, just my opinion, from my experiences. Again, please use the knowledge that's in here for whatever you need, and then if there's stuff in here that you don't agree with, you certainly don't need to use it. But let's get started. This is kind of one of my favorite things to talk about, so here we go. Oranges and livestock. What? Okay. So this is something I do all the time, with my 4-H kids when I was doing 4-H, and this is, it kind of hones in on what's important in the reality of raising livestock, and when we're talking about selection of livestock and where we want our projects to go. So what I have here is I have four basically balls. And I'm going to put my little cursor over here. This guy here with the little sad face is ball number one. This one here with the googly eyes is number two. Tongue out's number three. And then just kind of plain old Jano smiley face is number four. And so, I want you to take a second right now to get your notepad out and your pencil and go ahead and look at these four little critters here. Imagine that they're livestock, and choose how you would place this class, um, and how you would select. I would almost bet you that a majority of you are going to probably choose this one. It's bigger, it's happier, it looks healthier. It just seems vibrant, and probably one of the ones we're going to avoid choosing is this little sad one here. We're kind of oblong shaped. We're not really a great circle. But go ahead and take a second or pause this video and select based on these four things how you would place them. So remember, this is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So imagine these are the livestock that you're looking at in the pen. They're just running around. They've got four animals in that pen, and you're selecting your top picks. And then here's a back view of the same. So again, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. All right. So we've made our pick, and these animals have been skinned. Can you tell of the three which one had the thickest hide? And this white right here, this is fat. And so this is reality. So if we remember, number two was huge, looked really good, but now we're starting to see that number two is looking a lot more like number three, and number four, not that much fat on this critter, and number one had no fat at all. Looks like number one is one of those animals that maybe hasn't been fed properly, is lean, definitely needs more time growing. So this is if we were to take them to slaughter and start getting them processed. This is what we're looking at. Okay, so does this kind of change your opinion on what your selection would be now? So again, I went ahead and took pictures of this. So let's try to judge them again now. So this is number one, number two, number three, and number four. And this is as if these animals still have, a lot of fat on their body. They haven't been completely gutted yet. We're waiting, to get the organs out, and they're not really at a hanging yield yet. So take another second to judge them. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can place them however you'd like, and we'll keep going. Okay, so here we go. We've cleaned the fat off. We processed them. They're now officially a hanging carcass. And what do you think? What can you say now? So we know number one was exactly what we expected. We saw that animal was skinny. This animal, wasn't taken care of that well. It was left out on pasture. It got super it got full of parasites. Maybe it got sick for a bit. So number one, that's what we're looking like. Number two, boy, this was the biggest animal of the bunch. This animal was massive when it walked in the ring. When we first looked at it come into the ring, we thought, holy moly, that's the animal maybe to beat. A lot of kids will see the biggest animal in class and they're like, that's definitely the class winner. But I will tell you what, a trained judge knows that this is what's going to come out of that. This is why we feel those animals. This is why we push our fingers into those animals, because we want to feel how much fat is in this animal. And so look at the fat. Look at the fat content that this animal had. We trimmed all of this off. This is all wasted product that isn't going to be eaten. It's not going to be utilized, for human consumption. And so we're left with this. And so this is all of your hard-earned dollars. This is your feed. And this can also be your lack of exercise. And so this is something to think about. Okay, we look at number 3. Number 3 looks okay. We don't have a lot of fat. It's pretty similar in size to number 2, but we've got kind of this blemish here, and we'll kind of go into more of that information here in a bit. And then number four is kind of rocking it over here. Not a lot of fat, didn't have a lot of loose skin, and we kind of have a huge difference in yield for product as far as weight goes. This animal, is definitely given us a higher percentage of carcass quality and carcass weight compared to these other animals that we trimmed all this other stuff off of. So, are you surprised? Are you surprised how this turned out? So let's see. So this was animal number 1. This was the animal that wasn't fed, the animal that got sick during its time. And so we kind of figured that this is where we were going to be with number 1. And this is animal number 2. If you remember, animal number 2 was that big, huge animal that walked into the class, shocked everybody. They watched it move and they thought, wow, look at all that power. It's a massive animal. But look, they're similar in size. And then animal number 3, we're going to call these things right here. This is like injection site issues. This might be like an issue with this animal got beat up in the pen by other animals in the trailer ride. It got smacked around a bit. And so we've got now qualities with our meat that are an issue. These are parts of this animal now that we can't eat. And it's not going to help towards our overall productiveness of this animal. And then if we look at animal number 4, this is by far the superior animal that we had in the class. And maybe some of you placed it first, maybe some of you didn't. I know probably majority of you didn't, but these are things to think about when you're selecting your livestock and you're looking at animals. A lot of times what you see on the outside isn't exactly what it's going to be on the inside. And that's always a really good thing to know. Because again, it's not about the biggest animal. It's not about the smallest animal. It's about the most correct animal, the animal that handles the freshest. And so this is definitely something to think about when you're selecting livestock. So what did we learn from this exercise? And maybe we've already kind of gone over that. Were the placings the same for you all the way through? If they were the same for you all the way through, I don't know. I don't really believe that. But maybe some of you are just really good at this. Were you surprised to see how fatty, one of those critters was, specifically number 2? And was that your first place pick initially? I would say most beginning livestock producers are going to choose the biggest animal first. And so that was strategic for me to make it like that. I wanted you to see that a lot of the times the bigger animals, they're not always the best animals to go into the freezer. And this is how livestock judging goes, and why, again, bigger is not always better. So when considering livestock, there's a lot to think about. Is this a terminal animal? Is this like a county fair project? Is this a breeding animal? Are we going to be producing fair projects with this animal? And then, or is this a pet? A lot of people have goats as sentimental value, just to run around the place. A lot of people have lambs or sheep, whatever they're doing, just because they just enjoy them. So, when you're picking out animals, these are important things to consider. You got to think about what is the purpose and the function of this animal. And based on that, how am I going to select what best fits my needs? So terminal stock in baseball, what? And So all the kids, every youth that I've talked to, I've worked with, whether it was for round robin or if they come out and did some clinics with me, this is definitely something that they've heard from me. And Major League Baseball stinks. I'm not a big fan of baseball. I don't love it. It's kind of boring for me. But this was just how I remembered it when I was in school and I was taking tests. I learned this from a very old um, professor at Oregon State University. He has since retired. He's been retired for a while, but this kind of really stuck with me. Baseball was his favorite thing. And so I made sure to put this on the top of my paper when I turned in that test. And I'm certain that when he saw it, he probably had a grin, thinking, that smart guy, Coben, what's he thinking? But anyway, let's go into this. So when choosing a market project, and we have to assume it's going to be a terminal animal. And terminal, the definition of that is basically we're using it for meat purpose only. This isn't going to be something that we're going to put back into the herd for breeding. This is something that's going to be slaughtered and put as in the retail market for consumption. And so when we think about consumption, the first thing that comes to mind is muscle. And so when we're selecting terminal stock, we need to think about major as first, which is muscle. So when you look at a goat or a lamb, you want to make sure that they've got a lot of muscle, that they've got enough muscle to kind of get you where you need to be at the top of your class and where they need to be, or grow into to be a good yield and quality for the public as a retail product. Um, L for league, it stands for length. Or loin. I used to say it was mainly loin because really the length of loin dictates the length of the animal. That's a huge part of this. Something to remember. I'm going to have some pictures in here to kind of show you how to do that. I wish that it was a little nicer outside, that I could take some videos and really show you how to look at this. But hopefully I can explain it enough in picture. And then baseball, B, bone. This one people always kind of question me about because they say bone, how would that matter in choosing a terminal market project? We don't eat the bone. And that's true. We don't eat the bone. But what we do know about bone is the bigger bone the animal, likely the wider the frame, the bigger the structure, which means that that animal is packing a lot more muscle and has the capabilities to be a much larger animal and provide significantly more pounds, for meat to go into retail. And then stinks as structure. And structure is a really important thing to think about. It's something that honestly I might sometimes put ahead of some of the other things. As a breeder, structure rises to the top. But when we're talking about terminal animals, sometimes structure isn't the most important thing. And one thing I guess that's not important with structure when it comes to terminal animals, some of you may go to the fairs and see sheep or goats with the parrot mouth, but they can still eat. And so a lot of times it's more like a cosmetic thing, and it's not really hurting that animal, and they can still continue to gain, but it's not going to be, a huge detrimental thing to the overall quality of that animal as far as its meat purpose. But what about structure and breed stock? Does this apply? And so the answer of that is absolutely. And structure applies to terminal animals as well. And this picture here on the right is a really great example why structure is important. And so the biggest question I always have is for the youth is who's going to get down to the feed bunk better. If we look at these three pictures or these three sheep in this picture, we can see, look at the stress that the second lamb and the third lamb have on those joints, and look how they're going to be walking down to that feed bunk. Are they going to be able to get around quite as well as the first animal? Probably not. And so this is why structure is important for breed stock for sure, because this is something that we're going to breed into our animals to pass down to other animals, but it's also really important for our terminal stock as well. And so kind of, if you don't believe me, I always say, try this at home, walk like the sheep in the middle and the one on the right. Does it put pressure on your joints? And after a while, it's definitely going to put some pressure on your joints. And, do you think you could walk like this long term? And these animals, they're expected to walk like this. They're expected to run like this, or expected to exercise like this. And a lot of this, this bad structure issue, if we're not taking care of feet too, like we were talking about in the first video about husbandry, and we're not trimming feet right, then we have this animal that's really struggling. And we're going to see, some pretty bad flaws as they move in the ring. And you're definitely going to be lower in the class because of those structural defects. So when you're going out to select animals, make sure you're looking at those back feet. Make sure you're looking at those front feet, because the front can look exactly the same here as the back. You don't want an animal to be splayed out with their toes. You don't want them to be pigeon toed. You don't want them to hawk in. Those are all things that you need to be paying attention to when you go out into that pen and you're at the breeders and you're looking for a project. So when I look at projects, so we talked about MLBS, Major League Baseball stinks, our muscle, loin, bone, and structure. And why those are important, we have to think about, what the purpose of these animals are in what we're doing with the fair and our projects. And you have to consider the most important cuts of meat. And so the most important cuts of meat on these guys is the leg, the loin, and the rib. And so, like I said before, I was going to try to post a picture of this. So this is the loin of this lamb. It's going to be from the very last rib, to the hip, and we're looking here. This guy here, he's measuring with his hands how long that loin is. And if you can put your thumb back up against kind of this hip bone, and you can touch the back of that last rib, that'll tell you how long that loin is. And the length of loin really helps also determine the length of this animal. And here we're looking at the width of the loin, and we want an animal with a big, wide loin, because that's a big, major cut of meat for our industry. Then over here with this goat, we've got a couple goats, and we're looking here at evaluating, muscling of the center leg. Here's the center of the leg. And so basically what we're saying is, how wide is it? If we compare this animal here, number 1, to this animal here, number 4, this is a lot thicker animal. This is a lot thinner animal, obviously. But then here goes back to that question I had, though, with our oranges. The thickest animal, does this animal look like maybe it could be a little over-conditioned back here? Does it look like it has maybe more fat? Would we say that maybe this animal is a little fresher than this one? It kind of just depends. And also, these are really bad pictures, but look at the hawk. Look at the pasterns on this animal. Look how low they're dipping. And this is an issue that I don't like to see in the ring, when these dew claws are kind of sitting down low, their pasterns are breaking down. And that can be from bad hooves, that can be from structural defects, and this could also just be genetic too. And so this is something to think about, for sure, whenever you're selecting an animal. So always be kind of looking at these things. Rib, we're looking for with the rib space, the depth of body, and then checking that top line, see how strong that rib structure really is. And so we'll kind of go into that here. But first, I've got another little picture here. This is just something I found online. I think it's really helpful. But you can definitely tell, this animal's got wider ribs. We can't see how long it is, but we can probably put a plate on this animal's back and eat our dinner. And this is kind of what we're looking for. Chances are, if you put your hands on this animal, you're not going to feel the spinous process very well. And if we were to dump water on this animal's back, right about here, it would start to drop off. It would roll to here and then completely drop off. On this animal, we might have the water dropping off down here. So that kind of shows you, how much smaller this animal is compared to animal A. And then, like that chunky orange we had, number 2, that's this critter right here. And what I want you to pay attention to is look at the leg space here between this skinny lamb and this fat lamb. And then look at this. This animal is standing on a significantly stronger base. It's standing on much wider corners. This animal is deep in this twist. It's a wide. This is a massive sheep. This one, we've got like cresting here. This is all fat. This is all fat, and we can tell. So this animal might look like this animal in the ring, but when this animal tracks away from you, it's going to walk narrow, which is a good indicator to tell you that this animal is not as big as this fat is making it seem. And so that's something to pay attention to when they walk away from you. Are they standing square? Are they walking wide? Are they toeing in? Are they walking very narrow? And that all comes down to structure and hips. And this is definitely more what you're going to be looking for. An animal that's going to stand true and wide, walk true and wide, and not something like this that somebody is trying to hide some flaws with a little bit extra conditioning. So this is a great picture. You can keep looking at it if you'd like, go back into this video and pause it and just study this. But this is definitely a good thing to look at for animals that are finished. This animal here is definitely not finished. This animal needs a lot more feed. And yeah, this is something that somebody just bought. They threw it out in pasture. They just fed it to barely make weight. And then they came to fair just skipping by, hoping to just make some money. And this is not what projects are about. Animal C. Okay, so we've talked about that. So let's see this, in real time. I don't really like any of these goats. I'm just gonna start that off like that. But it's kind of, I really like this chart here for the evaluation of kind of what we're seeing. So we can't see these animals on the move. We're not putting our hands on them. But what I want you to see, we were talking about rib shape and strengthen that rib and all that in the top line. And look at this animal here. This top line, look at how bad it breaks. This animal does not have, does it look like it can hold as much muscle as, say, maybe this animal or this animal? Definitely not. And actually, if this animal was fed up and exercised, maybe a little bit older, this animal would, in my opinion, beat this one here. And so, when you go out there and select your market animals, you need to be looking at, how strong is their top line. As they walk away from you, how wide do they walk? When they walk to you, how wide do they walk? Are they standing true and square on those feet? How deep are they in that twist and that center leg? How wide are they at that center leg? And if we look at these pictures here, obviously this animal, it needs time. It's green. It needs more groceries. It has the potential, though. It really does, to be a nice animal. And I would say, honestly, if we were looking at all of these animals, this animal looks, based on this picture, like it's standing on significantly more bone than any of these other animals. I also think it stands a little squarer than some of these animals, especially this one here. This could just be a bad picture. But yeah, this animal has a lot of potential. It just needs groceries and time. But I think this is something really good to look at. You're going to go out there to farms and you're going to see these guys and you're going to see them, moving away from you. And so you definitely want to be looking at these types of things, level top. Look at this twist here, the width from center of their leg. And look at the pasterns, look at here, these pasterns are kind of dipping down and these ones are good and elevated. So these are definitely things to be considering whenever you're going to try to pick out a project. And so can we apply this to breed stock? And the answer to that is absolutely. And it's super important. We have to remember structure is important with our breed stock, but all of those things that we just talked about, we want those animals to be passing that down to their offspring so that they can make quality animals in the ring. So, what's different? What's different specifically about breed stock versus the terminal stock that we just talked about? And, big thing that's different is its specific breed characteristics. So when you go to a club, jackpot club show or something that's not a specific breed industry show, we're not looking for certain things. Like, for example, the Hampshire sheep, they've got fluffy legs and a fluffy face. Boer goats with that Roman nose. The Duroc pig with the floppy ears. If you were to take a York pig to a Duroc show, you're going to place last. Why? Because it doesn't have the breed characteristics that species should have. So just thinking about that kind of stuff and the breeds, that's what's going to be really different there. And then important considerations with breed stock, we got to talk about structure. Structure is super important. Structure's about what this is all about. These animals are going to be with us for years and years and years. We need that doe or that ewe to be out on pasture, to thrive, to be not a poor doer, one that can take minimal amounts of feed and make maximum amount of product. She needs to have good hip structure. She needs to have depth of body. She needs to have a good teat structure, because her purpose is to produce. And so it's a lot different. We're not looking for, our breeding females to be huge and massive and ready to go into the show ring with all this, muscling and fat, because it's really hard to carry kids and to pass kids through a birth canal when you have all that going on. And so there's definitely important considerations with breed stock and what we're looking for. Also, we have to think about genetic characteristics when we talk about breed stock. When we talk about like milk production, birth weights, weaning weights, parasite resistance, all this stuff can be attributed to genetics, and all very important in every program. There's nothing that irritates me more than when I've got a really nice doe. She's got, she's one of the best does out on the pasture, and then she doesn't produce milk hardly, even though she's getting the right amounts of feed, or she doesn't want to take care of those kids, so her maternal instincts are bad. Those are all things to consider when you're looking at breed stock that isn't specifically just muscle, loin length and bone. So these are definitely things to think about. And then again, the kids that work with me, the kids that judge under me, the kids that do the round robin with me, all the kids that have me as a judge round robin, they always get asked this question. And my question is always, what is the definition of hybrid vigor? And this is something I love about crossbreds. This is before I got into, the boar goat stuff. I was into the club lambs, and I loved crossing them. I loved to see what I could create from crossing these breeds. And so let's kind of get into that. What is hybrid vigor? Hybrid vigor is basically, I guess, the easiest way to describe it for people who don't understand, because most people do have dogs, is when you go to the pound and you get a mutt, and that mutt dog, which is a cross of who knows what, lab, German Shepherd, Pit Bull, whatever it is, it's got 6 different breeds of dog in it. You notice that the mutt never has problems. You get that purebred French bulldog, and now you've got a dog that has allergies, ear issues. It's constantly snoring. It can't hardly breathe. And then you look at that French bulldog crossed with some other breed, and now you've got a dog that can breathe. You got a dog that doesn't have allergies. You got a dog that isn't prone to getting specific diseases, and overall is just a better dog. And we can kind of compare the same thing in the livestock industry when we cross different breeds of, of these terminal breeds. For example, we have the Suffolk on the right and the Hampshire on the left. We can all look at the Suffolk and say that's a big, tall, framed female animal. She's got some legs on her. Whereas we look at the Hamp and we can see, yeah, okay, the Hampshire, she's a little squattier. They're very comparable though, and that's why they make a really great cross. You don't want to take something that's totally different from another and cross those animals to try to make a club animal. And so we can look at both of these breeds right here, and we can appreciate them for their differences and the things that they bring to the table. And then when we cross those animals, we hope that we're going to have the best of both worlds. And so we'll go forward here. So we take these 2 animals here and we cross them, and now we've got this. And this is the goal. We want to make an animal that is big, framey, that's packs plenty of muscle, has a good top line, is super deep. And I can just tell, looking at all these lambs, you can kind of get an idea of probably what they feel like, how fresh they handle. And this is why hybrid vigor, in my opinion, is my favorite. And this is a big part of why I was so involved in club stock. So I kind of have another here. I know this is a small ruminant thing that we're talking about, but this is just another thing to go about. Is if we take this Yorkshire here and we take this Hampshire here, what's it going to make? And it's going to make one of these here, which is the blue butt. I know this isn't a great picture, but these are awesome animals. And we talk about this stuff and hybrid vigor and how important that is. And I think it's important for you to know, what you're doing. So if you're going to be doing breed stock specifically, you're probably not going to be crossing animals to make that hybrid vigor. But if you're going to be raising club animals, it's important to know what's making up the genetics of that animal, and ultimately, will make you a better project. And so this lecture, it's a lot to digest, and I understand that. There's a lot that goes into these animals. There's a lot about them that you need to know. And when you go out there, I post a picture here. This is of me with a bunch of kids working out at Weezer with a 4-H group. I'm doing this all summer long. And if you look at this lineup of goats, I mean, you can just tell, look at the difference between all of these animals. This animal here is so much different than this animal here, which is different from this animal here. And then look at this animal here. I love this animal here. There's pros and cons to everything. Just a reminder again that there's no such thing as a perfect animal. There's always going to be flaws. And if you're going to be a good showman, how are you going to hide those flaws? You know, that's a really important thing when we get into it. But selection is important. We can see here on this animal, we got kind of a steep hip, and here I can't really see the hip, but based on how this animal looks from here, we've got a really nice animal right here. So, these are all things to consider. Go back and look at all of that stuff. You know, and what does it take to kind of get this information to understand it? And I don't expect anybody to understand this right now, right off the bat. This has taken me years of selecting animals, looking at animals to really know exactly kind of what I like. And it takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of producing to know. It takes a lot of studying. A really great source of studying is going to youth jackpots and listening to judges, looking at animals. And when they tell you, this is what I like or don't like about this animal, this is why I place this animal ahead of that one, pay attention to what they're saying. And when I say pay attention to what they're saying, I don't mean just listen to them. I mean, look at that animal and ask yourself, can I see what he's trying to, paint a picture to show me? And if you can't see it, then don't be afraid to reach out to that judge and ask them, hey, you mentioned something about this on my animal. What do you mean? And that's a really important thing. So when the judge comes up to you in the ring and they say, hey, I love your animal, I love your presentation out here, but these are the things that could be better. Make sure that you're looking and you're watching and you understand it. If you don't understand it, take that time to say, can you just show me really quick what you're talking about? And then study that, look at that animal and say, okay, when I select my next animal for next year, this is something that I need to think about when I pick an animal, and so I can have even more successful time in the ring. And then I have losing there as part of what it takes to get here. And that's the truth. If you go into the ring and you expect to win everything and you never lose, you're never learning. You're never going to know what you could be doing differently for your animal. You're never going to know kind of what it's like and what you need to work on. And so when you lose, it's okay. It's okay to lose. I feel like it's important to lose. And that's all going to, attribute back to teaching you about raising these animals and selecting these animals and choosing what direction you want to go. So this is kind of like a really basic lecture about selection. I think there's some really great pictures in here. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out and ask me. Again, the quality of animal, it comes down to perspective. you know Anybody, you could take anybody and look at this lineup of goats, and just from this picture alone, and every judge can give you totally different placings as to what they think are important in those animals. And that's why judges are really cool, and that's why it's really great to go to a lot of different shows, because then you can hear a lot of different opinions. You can hear a lot of different things about your same animal. One judge may love something about your animal that another judge really doesn't like. And so that's where it comes down to that whole listening and learning process of taking in that information and saying, what do I know about it, and what more can I learn about it? So I hope that this helps. I know a lot of you are probably going to be starting to get your project soon. Take a look at the pictures, listen to this video a couple times, and think about, when you go out there and you're looking at these animals, what do they look like? What does their top look like? How do they walk away from you? How do they walk towards you? Look at their hide. Do we have a super loose skinned animal? Is it going to be fresh handling? there's so many things to look at with these guys, and hopefully this video is kind of giving you an idea and a guide as to what's important and not what's important. So anyway, we'll be ready for the next video after this one, but I hope you guys enjoyed this.